The wildflowers in her hands were bright yellow, purple, and deep crimson. When Alexander Quinn first saw her kneeling in the dirt, and something about the sight made him stop his BMW in the middle of the narrow street. He had driven this route every morning for the past 3 years, the quickest path from his penthouse apartment to Quinn Manufacturing headquarters, where he oversaw 2,000 employees and managed contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. In all that time, the vacant lot on Maple Street had been nothing but broken concrete, weeds, and a rusted chain link fence someone had torn down years ago. Now a woman in faded jeans and a white t-shirt was pressing small plants into the cracked earth like she was painting a masterpiece. Alexander pulled to the curb and turned off the engine. He sat there for a moment, watching her work. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and dirt streaked across her forearm. Behind her sat a wheelbarrow filled with more plants, bags of soil and gardening tools that had clearly seen better days. He checked his watch. He had a board meeting in 40 minutes, presentations to review, and a conference call with investors in Tokyo. Getting out of the car made no sense at all. He got out of the car. She looked up as he approached, her eyes a startling shade of green even from several feet away. There was something guarded in her expression, like she expected him to tell her to leave. "Morning," Alexander said, suddenly aware he was wearing a $3,000 suit and Italian leather shoes that were completely wrong for standing in dirt. "What are you planting?" The woman sat back on her heels, studying him. "Wildflowers. Black-eyed Susans, purple coneflowers, California poppies, native species mostly. Things that can handle poor soil and not much water. On this lot. Does someone own this?" "The city does. I checked." She turned back to her work, pressing another plant into the hole she had dug. "It's been sitting empty for 8 years. I filed for a community beautification permit 3 months ago. They approved it last week." Alexander looked around the space. It was maybe a 1/4 acre, wedged between an old hardware store and a building that used to be a restaurant. Not prime real estate, but in this neighborhood it could become something. "You're doing this alone." She patted dirt around the plant's base, her movements efficient and practiced. "I put up flyers asking for volunteers. Nobody showed up." There was no bitterness in her voice, just fact. "That's okay, I have time. What's your name?" She hesitated, then looked up again. "Rebecca Vance, and you are?" "Alexander Quinn." He loosened his tie. The morning sun was already warm, promising a hot day. "Do you have extra gloves?" Rebecca's eyebrows rose. "You want to help in that suit?" "The suit will dry clean. Do you have gloves or not?" A slow smile spread across her face, transforming it from pretty to genuinely beautiful. "In the wheelbarrow. The gray ones should fit you." Alexander shrugged off his jacket and draped it over the BMW's hood. He rolled up his sleeves, found the gloves, and pulled them on. They smelled like earth and growing things. "Show me what to do." For the next hour, Rebecca taught him how to prepare the soil, how deep to dig the holes, how to gently remove the plants from their containers without damaging the roots. She explained that wildflowers were tougher than people thought, that they evolved to thrive in difficult conditions, that a meadow of native species could support hundreds of insects and birds. "You really know your stuff," Alexander said, sitting back after planting his 8th coneflower. His back was starting to ache in a way it never did during his morning workouts. "I studied environmental science in college." Rebecca was working a few feet away, moving faster than him but never making him feel slow. "I wanted to work for the Parks Department, maybe help restore natural habitats. That didn't work out the way I planned." "What do you do now?" "I wait tables at Marco's, the Italian place on 5th Street, and I plant gardens wherever they'll let me." She gestured at the lot around them. This is my third project like this. There's a pocket park over on Riverside that I planted 2 years ago, and a strip along the elementary school fence that's full of butterflies now. Alexander thought about his own work, the spreadsheets and projections and strategic plans that filled his days. He was proud of what he had built. When his father had died 5 years ago, Quinn Manufacturing had been struggling, outdated, losing contracts to more innovative competitors. Alexander had taken over at 28 and transformed it, modernizing their production lines, pursuing new markets, tripling their revenue. He provided good jobs, fair wages, and opportunities for advancement, but he couldn't remember the last time he had made something with his hands. "What about you?" Rebecca asked. "What do you do when you're not stopping to help random women plant flowers?" "I run a manufacturing company. We make industrial components, parts for construction equipment, that kind of thing." He deliberately didn't say which company. People often acted differently when they realized how much money he had. "That sounds important. It pays the bills." He reached for another plant. "This is better, though. More immediate results." They worked in comfortable silence for a while. A few cars passed, and one man walking his dog stopped to watch them for a minute before moving on. The neighborhood was waking up around them, shop doors opening, the smell of coffee drifting from somewhere nearby. "I should probably go," Alexander said finally, checking his watch. It was already past 9. He had missed his meeting entirely. "But I could come back tomorrow morning." "If you want the help." Rebecca looked at him with those green eyes, something surprised and pleased in her expression. "You do that, I would." He pulled off the gloves and brushed dirt from his pants, knowing his assistant was going to have questions when he walked into the office looking like he had been rolling around in a garden. "Same time. Same time." Rebecca smiled again, and Alexander felt something shift in his chest, something he hadn't felt in longer than he cared to admit. He drove to work with dirt under his fingernails and arrived to find his executive assistant Sandra practically vibrating with anxiety. She had rescheduled his morning, made excuses to the board, and pushed his afternoon meetings back an hour to compensate. "What happened?" she asked, her eyes on his stained pants. "Are you okay? I was about to send someone to look for you." "I'm fine. I just stopped to help someone with a project." Alexander headed for his office, already thinking about the work he needed to catch up on. It won't happen again. But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. The next morning, Alexander stopped at a coffee shop and bought 2 large coffees and a bag of pastries before driving to the lot on Maple Street. Rebecca was already there, unloading more plants from an old truck that looked held together by rust and determination. "You came back," she said when she saw him. "I said I would." He handed her a coffee. "I didn't know how you take it, so I got cream and sugar on the side. Black is perfect, thank you." She wrapped her hands around the cup, and he noticed she had thin fingers, calloused but graceful. "You didn't have to bring breakfast. Consider it payment for the gardening lessons." They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side as the morning warmed up. Alexander found himself asking questions about the plants, about Rebecca's other projects, about her life. She was 26, had grown up in a small town 3 hours north, had a younger brother in the Marines and parents who owned a hardware store. "They think this is all a waste of time," Rebecca admitted, gesturing at the flowers they were planting. "They wanted me to get a practical job, something with benefits and retirement plans. They don't understand why I'm doing this." "You understand why?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "When I was a kid, there was this empty lot behind our house, just dirt and garbage. Then one spring, wildflowers started growing. Nobody planted them, they just appeared, purple and yellow and white, stretching out like a painting. I used to sit there for hours, watching the bees and butterflies. It made me feel like the world was bigger than our little town, like there was magic in ordinary places. She pressed another plant into the ground, patting the soil with careful hands. I want to give that to other people. I want to make spaces where that magic can happen. Alexander thought about his own childhood, about the pressure to excel, to achieve, to build something impressive. His father had expected him to take over the company, and he had. He was good at it. But somewhere along the way he had forgotten what it felt like to want something just because it was beautiful. "That's not a waste of time," he said quietly. Rebecca looked at him, and something passed between them, some recognition or understanding that made his heart beat faster. They worked until almost 9, and when Alexander finally stood to leave, his pants were beyond saving, and he had blisters forming on his palms despite the gloves. "Tomorrow?" Rebecca asked. "Tomorrow," Alexander confirmed. Over the next 2 weeks, Alexander's morning routine changed completely. He woke earlier, dressed in old jeans and T-shirts he hadn't worn in years, and drove to Maple Street while most of the city was still sleeping. He and Rebecca worked until 8 or 8:30, sometimes longer if they were in the middle of something. Then he would drive to work, shower in the executive bathroom, change into the suits he kept in his office, and start his actual job. Sandra noticed, of course. She was too observant not to. But she didn't pry, just adjusted his schedule without comment and made sure nothing critical was planned before 10 in the morning. The lot was transforming. What had been barren ground was now dotted with green, with splashes of color as the flowers began to bloom. Rebecca had a vision for the space, and Alexander watched it come to life row by row. She had planted the tall flowers in the back, medium-height plants in the middle, low-growing species along the front. She had created a winding path through the center, using mulch and stones she had collected from somewhere. There were bird feeders on posts, a small bench she had refurbished herself, and signs she had painted identifying the different species. "This is incredible," Alexander said one morning, standing in the center of the lot and looking around. "Rebecca, this is really incredible," she beamed with pride. "It's getting there. Give it another month and it'll be even better. The poppies will be blooming and the sunflowers should be tall by then. How are you paying for all this?" He had been wondering but hadn't wanted to pry. The plants, the soil, the tools, it added up. Rebecca's smile faded slightly. "Tips mostly. I've been saving. And some people have donated. The nursery on Highland gives me their plants that don't sell, things that are a little damaged or past their prime. They perk up once they're in the ground." "Like people," Alexander said without thinking. "Exactly like people." Rebecca met his eyes, and he felt that pull again, stronger now after 2 weeks of mornings spent together. They had been talking more, sharing more. He had told her about his father's death, about the weight of running the company, about the pressure of making decisions that affected thousands of lives. She had told him about her failed relationship with her college boyfriend, about her struggles to find meaningful work, about the loneliness of pursuing a dream nobody else understood. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said, pulling off her gloves. They were taking a break, sitting on the bench with water bottles and the last of the pastries Alexander had brought. "Why do you keep coming back? I'm grateful, don't get me wrong, but you clearly have important places to be. This has to be cutting into your work." Alexander looked at the flowers around them, at the bees already finding the blooms. "Honestly, I don't know. The first day I just saw you here and something made me stop, and then I kept coming back because—" He paused, trying to find the right words. "Because this feels real in a way most of my life doesn't. At work, everything is abstract. Numbers, projections, strategies. But this is tangible. We're making something that will be here, that will grow and change and support life, and I like being around you. You see the world differently than anyone I've ever met. Rebecca's cheeks flushed pink. I like being around you too. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone slicker maybe. Someone who would get bored after the first day, but you actually care, you listen. You remember things. She hesitated, then added, and you're good company. I've done a lot of these projects alone. It's better with you here. Alexander felt warmth spread through his chest. He wanted to kiss her, wanted it with a sudden fierce intensity that surprised him, but he held back. They were friends, partners in this project. He didn't want to mess that up by moving too fast. I should probably tell you something, he said instead. Quinn Manufacturing, the company I run, it's bigger than I made it sound. We have facilities in 4 states, about 2,000 employees. And I'm not just running it, I own it. My father left it to me. Rebecca was quiet, processing this. So you're rich, very rich, yes. Does that usually matter when you tell people? Always. People either want something from me or they treat me differently, like I'm not a regular person anymore. Rebecca looked at the dirt under her fingernails, at her stained jeans and worn boots. I guess I can see why you didn't lead with that. She met his eyes. Does it bother you that I'm not? Rich, I mean, I'm barely getting by most months. God, no, Rebecca, that's not money doesn't matter, not like this, not compared to what we're doing here. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, thanks for telling me. They went back to work, but something had shifted. They were both more aware of each other, more careful. Alexander caught himself watching her as she worked, noticing the way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating, the way she hummed under her breath when she was happy. He was falling for her. The realization hit him one morning as he drove to Maple Street, his heart lifting as he turned the corner and saw her truck already parked. He was falling for a waitress who planted wildflowers in vacant lots and saved her tips to buy endangered native species. A woman who saw beauty in broken places and believed in magic. The thought should have terrified him. In his world, relationships were strategic, partnerships between people of similar backgrounds and expectations. He had dated plenty of women, polished, accomplished women who understood his lifestyle and shared his ambitions. None of them had ever made him want to wake up at 5 in the morning just to spend a few hours digging in dirt. You're smiling, Rebecca said when he got out of the car. Good morning. Very good morning. He grabbed the coffees he had brought and walked over to her. What are we working on today? The butterfly garden in the back corner. I have milkweed for the monarchs and some host plants for swallowtails. They worked through the morning, and Alexander found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did anymore. With Rebecca, he didn't have to be the CEO, the boss, the man with all the answers. He could just be Alexander, someone learning about plants and getting his hands dirty and laughing at bad jokes. Around 8:30, a man in a suit approached the lot. He was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and an expensive watch. Excuse me. Are you Alexander Quinn? Alexander stood, instantly wary. I am. Robert Chen. I'm on the City Planning Commission. He extended his hand and Alexander shook it, aware of Rebecca watching them. I've been hearing interesting things about this lot. And then someone told me they saw Alexander Quinn, the Alexander Quinn, here planting flowers at 7 in the morning. I had to come see for myself. It's a community project, Alexander said carefully. Rebecca is the one who made it happen. I'm just helping out. Robert looked around the lot, his expression approving. It's impressive. Really impressive. We've been trying to figure out what to do with these vacant city-owned properties. Most of them just sit empty, becoming dumping grounds, but this. He walked along the mulch path, examining the plants. This is exactly the kind of initiative we want to encourage. Miss Vance, was it? Yes, sir. Rebecca had stood too, wiping her hands on her jeans. Have you thought about expanding this? There are at least a dozen lots like this one in the city. If you could replicate what you've done here, I've thought about it, Rebecca interrupted, then looked embarrassed. Sorry, but yes, I have lists. Places that could work, species that would thrive in different conditions, cost projections. I just don't have the resources to do more than 1 or 2 a year on my own. Robert pulled out a business card. Call me next week. Let's talk about what kind of support the city might be able to provide. Funding, volunteers, permits fast-tracked. I can't promise anything, but I think we could work something out. After he left, Rebecca stared at the business card like it might disappear. Did that just happen? That just happened. Alexander couldn't stop grinning. Rebecca, do you know what this means? You could actually do this, make it your career instead of just a side project. I don't know if I'm ready for that. What if I mess it up? What if the city invests in me and I can't deliver? You won't mess it up. Look at what you've already done. He gestured at the lot around them, vibrant and alive. You did this with almost no resources and no help, well, minimal help. Imagine what you could do with actual support. Rebecca's eyes were bright with tears. I'm scared. I know, but you should be more scared of not trying. Alexander stepped closer, close enough to smell the sunshine and earth on her skin. Rebecca, you have a gift. You see possibilities where other people see nothing. That's rare. Don't waste it because you're afraid. She looked up at him, and Alexander forgot about the city commissioner, about the flowers, about everything except the woman in front of him. Thank you, she whispered, for believing in me. Always, he said, and then he was kissing her. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to his shoulders, dirt and all. It was soft and sweet and felt like the most natural thing in the world. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Rebecca was smiling. I've been wanting to do that for a week, Alexander admitted. Only a week. I've been thinking about it since day 3. He laughed and pulled her close again, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. We should probably talk about this, about what it means. It means I like you and you like me, and we should definitely kiss more. I like that plan. He did kiss her again, longer this time, until they were both flushed and happy. I should probably also tell you that I'm very serious about this, about you. I don't do casual. Good, neither do I. Rebecca reached up and touched his face, her expression tender, but we should take it slow. Figure out how this works with our very different lives. Slow is good. I can do slow. Even as he said it, Alexander was already thinking about the future, about how much time they could spend together, about what it would mean to have someone like Rebecca in his life. Are you free for dinner tonight? Somewhere nice? How nice are we talking? As nice as you want. I know every restaurant in the city. Rebecca laughed. That sounds very rich person of you, but yes, I'd love dinner. Pick me up at 7. They exchanged phone numbers, and Alexander left for work feeling like he was floating. He made it through his meetings in a daze, his mind constantly drifting back to the feeling of kissing Rebecca, to the way she had looked at him like he was something precious. Sandra definitely noticed. You're in a good mood, she observed when he emerged from his afternoon conference call, actually smiling. I am. Does this have anything to do with your mysterious morning activities? Alexander considered deflecting, then decided against it. Sandra had worked for his father and then for him for nearly 15 years. She was discreet, loyal, and genuinely cared about his well-being. I met someone. She's special. Sandra's face lit up. Alexander, that's wonderful. What's her name? Rebecca. She's a gardener. Well, she's a waitress actually, but she plants these incredible wildflower gardens around the city. That's what I've been doing in the mornings, helping her with a project. You've been gardening. I've been gardening, he confirmed, finding the idea less strange than it would have seemed a month ago. And I really like her, Sandra. I think this could be something real. Then I'm happy for you. Lord knows you've been married to this company long enough. It's about time you found someone who makes you smile like that." That evening, Alexander arrived at Rebecca's apartment building right at 7. She lived in a modest complex on the west side of town, the kind of place that was clean but aging, practical but not fancy. She had texted him the address with a warning that it wasn't much to look at. He didn't care about any of that. When she opened the door, wearing a simple blue dress that made her eyes even more striking, he forgot how to breathe for a second. "You look beautiful." Rebecca blushed. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He took her to Savio's, the best Italian restaurant in the city, a place with white tablecloths and a wine list thicker than most books. He had called ahead, secured his usual corner table, the one with privacy and a view of the city lights. "This is incredible," Rebecca said, looking around with wide eyes. "I walk past this place sometimes. I never imagined I'd eat here. Order anything you want. Everything is amazing." They talked through dinner, the conversation flowing as easily as it did in the morning while they worked. Rebecca told him about growing up in a small town, about camping trips with her family, about the teacher who first encouraged her interest in plants. Alexander found himself sharing things he rarely discussed: his complicated relationship with his father, the loneliness of being at the top, the fear that he was becoming the kind of man who had forgotten how to live. "You're not that man," Rebecca said firmly. "That man wouldn't stop to plant flowers. I almost didn't. I sat in my car for a full minute arguing with myself about whether it made sense." "What made you decide to get out?" Alexander considered the question. "You looked so focused, so purposeful. Like nothing else in the world mattered except getting those flowers into the ground. I haven't felt that way about anything in a long time. I wanted to understand it. And do you understand it now?" "I'm starting to." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Being with you makes me remember what it's like to care about something just because it matters, not because it's profitable or strategic. You've given me that gift." Rebecca squeezed his fingers. "You've given me something too, confidence maybe, or validation. I've spent so long thinking I was crazy for wanting to plant gardens instead of having a real career. But you take it seriously. You treat my dreams like they're worth something. They are worth something. They're worth everything." After dinner, Alexander drove her home, reluctant for the evening to end. He walked her to her door and they stood there in the dim hallway, neither wanting to say goodbye. "I had a perfect time," Rebecca said. "Me too. Can I see you tomorrow? I mean, besides the morning. Maybe lunch." "I work lunch shift at Marco's, but I'm free after 4. Then I'll pick you up at 4. He kissed her softly, keeping it gentle even though he wanted to deepen it, to pull her close and never let go. "Sleep well, Rebecca." "You too, Alexander." Over the next few weeks, they fell into a pattern. Mornings at the lot, working on the garden that was now fully blooming and attracting attention from the neighborhood. People stopped regularly to admire it, to ask questions, to take pictures. Rebecca had created something genuinely special, a pocket of wild beauty in the middle of the city. They spent every available evening together too. Sometimes Alexander took her to nice restaurants or cultural events, introducing her to his world. Other times she showed him her favorite spots: the tiny Thai place with the best curry in the city, the used bookstore where she spent hours browsing, the park where she had completed her first guerrilla planting before she started getting permits. "Guerrilla planting?" Alexander had asked, amused. "I was younger and more impatient. I figured it was better to ask forgiveness than permission." She grinned. "Don't worry, I'm legit now, mostly." He met her friends, an eclectic group of artists, students, and service workers who welcomed him warmly once they got over the shock of Rebecca dating a millionaire. She met his circle too, though that went less smoothly. His business associates didn't know quite what to make of Rebecca, this genuine, down-to-earth woman who had no interest in their status games and didn't hesitate to call out pretension when she saw it. "They think I'm not good enough for you," Rebecca said after a particularly awkward dinner party. They were back at Alexander's penthouse, and she was curled up on his couch looking uncomfortable. "That's not true. Alexander, I saw the way they looked at me, like they were trying to figure out what you could possibly see in the waitress." He sat beside her and pulled her close. "Then they're idiots. Rebecca, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. You make me happy in a way I didn't think was possible. Anyone who can't see how incredible you are isn't worth our time. Your world and mine are so different. Sometimes I worry that's going to be a problem." "Our worlds are different," Alexander agreed. "But we're building something new, something that's just ours. That's better than either world alone." She relaxed against him. "When did you become so wise?" "The day I stopped to help a beautiful woman plant wildflowers." Rebecca had her meeting with Robert Chen, and it went better than she could have dreamed. The city was prepared to offer grants for materials, access to city-owned vacant lots, and assistance recruiting volunteers. They wanted to start with 3 pilot locations and expand from there if the project succeeded. "I can't do this alone," Rebecca said, sitting at Alexander's kitchen table surrounded by paperwork and plans. "Even with volunteers, it's too much. I'd have to quit Marco's to have enough time, but then I'd have no income. The grant covers materials, not salary." Alexander had been waiting for this conversation, thinking about what he wanted to offer and how to phrase it without sounding like he was trying to control her dreams. "What if I invested in you? Not the city program, you specifically. Enough to cover your living expenses for a year while you get this off the ground. Think of it as a business investment. You're creating something valuable, something that improves communities and increases property values." "It's sound financially." Rebecca looked torn. "I can't take your money, Alexander." "Why not? You'd take it from investors if you incorporated right. This is the same thing." "It's not the same and you know it. We're dating. It changes things." He came around the table and knelt beside her chair. "Rebecca, I love you," she sucked in a breath. "What? I love you. I've been in love with you for weeks, probably since that first morning. I love your passion and your vision and your kindness. I love the way you see magic in ordinary places. I love who I am when I'm with you." He took her hands. "So yes, this is different from a regular business investment. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I believe in what you're doing and I want to help make it possible. Not because you need rescuing, you've proven you can do this on your own. But because you shouldn't have to struggle unnecessarily when I have the resources to help. Let me do this, please." Tears were streaming down Rebecca's face. "I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and this will all be a dream." "Not a dream. I promise." He kissed her, tasting salt from her tears. "So you'll let me help?" "Only if we draw up a proper contract. I want this to be legitimate, not charity. I'll pay you back with interest once the business is established. If that's what you need, then that's what we'll do." They worked out the details over the next week, with Alexander insisting on involving his lawyers to make sure everything was legally sound. Rebecca was right that it needed to be a real business arrangement, something that stood on its own merit regardless of their relationship. The contract they created was more than fair. Alexander would provide funding for the first year, covering Rebecca's salary and emergency equipment costs beyond what the city grants provided. In return, he received a small percentage of any future profits if she ever expanded enough to make money beyond covering costs. They both knew the financial return would likely be minimal, but having the formal structure made Rebecca comfortable accepting the help. With the funding secured, Rebecca gave notice at Marco's. Her last day was emotional, her co-workers throwing her a small party and making her promise to come back for dinner regularly. "You're really doing this," her manager said, hugging her goodbye. "I'm so proud of you, Becca. You're going to change this city." Rebecca threw herself into the work with fierce determination. She hired 2 part-time assistants, both environmental science students thrilled to get practical experience. She worked with the city to identify the best locations for new gardens, considering foot traffic, existing plant life, and community need. She developed relationships with local nurseries, getting better prices and access to native species. Alexander watched her flourish, pride swelling in his chest every time he saw her present plans to the city council, or negotiate with suppliers, or coordinate volunteers. This was what she was meant to do, and he was honored to have played a small part in making it possible. The Maple Street lot was featured in the local newspaper. A full-page spread with photos of the flowers in bloom, and an interview with Rebecca about her vision for urban greening. The article mentioned Alexander's involvement, which led to some uncomfortable attention reporters calling his office, Society page columnists speculating about their relationship, business contacts suddenly very interested in environmental initiatives. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said when a photographer showed up while they were working on the second lot. "I never meant to drag you into a media circus. It's not your fault. This is what happens when you do something newsworthy." Alexander waved off the photographer, who retreated but didn't leave. "Besides, I'm proud to be associated with your work. I just wish they'd focus more on what you're accomplishing and less on my bank account." The attention did have one positive effect. Donations started coming in, people sending money to support Rebecca's gardens. A local business association offered to sponsor a 4th location. A wealthy widow contacted Rebecca about transforming a lot she owned into a memorial garden for her late husband. 6 months after that first morning on Maple Street, Rebecca's organization she had officially incorporated as Green Cities Initiative was managing 5 active gardens and had a waiting list of potential locations. She had hired 3 full-time staff and had a roster of over 100 regular volunteers. "I can't believe this is my life," she said one evening. They were at Alexander's place, cooking dinner together, something they did most nights when she wasn't too exhausted from work. "A year ago, I was saving tips to buy discount plants. Now I'm hiring employees and giving presentations to the mayor's office. You've earned all of it." Alexander kissed the top of her head as he passed behind her to get to the refrigerator. "I'm just glad I get to watch it happen." "You're doing more than watching. You show up at every planting day, you've connected me with half my major donors, and you still help with the actual work even though you definitely don't have time for it." It was true that Alexander's schedule had become chaotic. He was still running Quinn manufacturing, which remained demanding. But he had started delegating more, trusting his executive team to handle things he used to insist on overseeing personally. His board had noticed the change and, surprisingly, approved. The company was performing better than ever, and Alexander was less stressed, more creative in his strategic thinking. "It turns out I'm better at my job when I'm not doing it every waking moment," he told his COO during a quarterly review. "Who knew?" "Some of us have been trying to tell you that for years," Marcus replied dryly. "Whatever you're doing differently, keep doing it." What he was doing differently was Rebecca. Loving her, building a life with her, learning to balance ambition with presence. She had changed him in fundamental ways, softened his edges without diminishing his drive. 1 year after they met, Alexander took Rebecca back to the Maple Street lot. It was a warm spring morning, and the garden was in full bloom, even more spectacular than the year before. The plants had matured, spreading and filling in gaps, creating a riot of color and texture. Butterflies danced between the flowers, and birds sang from the feeders. "Remember when this was just broken concrete and weeds," Rebecca said, standing in the center of the path. "I remember when you were out here alone, and I was crazy enough to stop and help. Best decision you ever made. Second best." Alexander took her hand and led her to the bench, the one she had refurbished that first week. "Rebecca, this past year has been the happiest of my life. You've taught me what really matters, shown me how to find joy in simple things. You've made me a better man." "Alexander, what are you doing?" Her voice was shaky, like she knew but didn't want to assume. He dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "I'm asking you to marry me, to build a life with me, to keep showing me the magic in ordinary places, to let me support your dreams while you inspire mine. Will you marry me, Rebecca?" She was crying, nodding before he even finished the question. "Yes, yes, of course yes." The ring was an emerald, the exact shade of her eyes, set in platinum with small diamonds surrounding it. She held out her shaking hand and let him slide it on, then pulled him up and kissed him hard. "I love you so much," she said between kisses. "I can't believe this is real. Believe it. You're stuck with me now." They sat on the bench holding each other, surrounded by the garden they had planted together, and Alexander thought about how strange and perfect life could be. How one impulse decision to stop and help a stranger could change absolutely everything. They were married 6 months later in a ceremony held at the Riverside Park Garden, the first one Rebecca had planted years before. It was small, just close friends and family, with wildflowers everywhere and Rebecca's mother crying happy tears. Alexander's mother, who had initially been skeptical of Rebecca, had come around completely after getting to know her, and now she and Rebecca talked on the phone every week. Rebecca wore a simple white dress and flowers in her hair. Alexander wore his best suit and couldn't stop smiling. When they exchanged vows, promising to tend their love like a garden, nurturing it through all seasons, there wasn't a dry eye in attendance. "I can't believe you're married," Sandra said at the reception, which they held at a restaurant downtown. "Our Alexander, who swore he didn't have time for serious relationships. Turns out I just hadn't met the right person yet," Alexander said, watching Rebecca laugh with her brother across the room. "She's wonderful, really. You chose well. She chose me too, that's the miracle." Married life suited them both. They bought a house together, something between Alexander's penthouse and Rebecca's tiny apartment, a craftsman in an older neighborhood with a big yard that Rebecca immediately began transforming into a test garden for native species. She said she needed a space to experiment before recommending plants for public locations, but Alexander suspected she just loved having her own garden to tend. He found he loved it too, coming home to find her working in the yard, dirt-streaked and happy. He'd change out of his work clothes and join her, learning the names of 100 different plants, understanding the complex relationships between species, seeing the garden as a living ecosystem rather than just decoration. Green City's initiative continued to grow. 3 years after that first lot on Maple Street, Rebecca was managing 19 gardens throughout the city, with satellite projects starting in 2 neighboring towns. She had a full-time staff of 12 and had published a guide for urban wildflower gardening that was being used by similar initiatives in other states. "I got an email today," Rebecca said one evening at dinner. They were eating on their back porch, overlooking the garden that was lush with summer growth. From a woman in Portland. She read my guide and started her own urban greening project. She wanted to thank me for the inspiration. That's amazing. It is, but also weird. I'm just doing what makes sense to me. I don't think of myself as inspiring. You are, though, to a lot of people. Alexander reached across the table and took her hand. To me, most of all. You've been pretty inspiring yourself, you know. Quinn Manufacturing's sustainability initiatives have become industry standard. Other companies are following your lead. It was true. In the years since meeting Rebecca, Alexander had transformed his company's approach to environmental responsibility. They had reduced waste by 60%, invested in renewable energy for their facilities, and partnered with conservation organizations. It had required significant investment, but it had also improved their reputation and attracted new clients who valued corporate responsibility. You made me see that business success and environmental stewardship aren't opposing goals, Alexander said. That we could do both, should do both. We make a good team, the best team. 4 years into their marriage, Rebecca came to Alexander with news that made his heart nearly stop. They were in the garden, harvesting vegetables from the section she had designated for food crops. I'm pregnant, she said simply, her hand on her stomach and a nervous smile on her face. Alexander dropped the tomatoes he had been holding. Pregnant? You're pregnant? We're having a baby. We're having a baby. Her smile widened. Are you happy? I know we talked about waiting a few more years, but he kissed her deeply and thoroughly, then dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her stomach. I'm ecstatic, terrified but ecstatic. Me too, both of those things. They spent the evening making plans, talking about the future, imagining what their child would be like. Would she have Rebecca's green eyes or Alexander's dark hair? Would he love gardens the way his mother did, or would he be drawn to business like his father? They agreed it didn't matter, that they would support whatever path their child chose, that the most important thing was raising someone kind and curious and brave. Pregnancy suited Rebecca. She glowed with it, her already beautiful face becoming radiant. She continued working through the second trimester, only slowing down when her doctor insisted. Her staff stepped up, taking on more responsibility, proving that Green City's initiative was sustainable beyond just Rebecca's personal involvement. Alexander tried to be present for everything: doctor's appointments, birthing classes, late-night ice cream runs when cravings struck. Quinn Manufacturing continued thriving under his leadership, but everyone knew his priority had shifted. Family came first now. Their daughter, Lily Rose Quinn, was born on a crisp October morning. She had Rebecca's eyes and a shock of dark hair, and Alexander fell in love the moment he saw her. He held her tiny body and made silent promises about the kind of father he would be, the world he would help create for her. She's perfect, Rebecca whispered, exhausted but happy in the hospital bed. Just like her mother, Alexander said, unable to look away from his daughter's face. They brought Lily home to a house overflowing with flowers, gifts from friends, family, Rebecca's staff and volunteers, Alexander's colleagues. It looked like a garden had exploded inside, which felt appropriate for their family. Fatherhood changed Alexander in ways he hadn't anticipated. He was still CEO of Quinn Manufacturing, still closing major deals and managing thousands of employees. But now he left work at 5 every day to be home for dinner. He took paternity leave and spent it learning to change diapers, soothe colic, and function on 3 hours of sleep. He discovered reserves of patience he hadn't known he possessed, and a capacity for love that expanded every time Lily smiled at him. Rebecca transitioned to working from home more, bringing Lily to garden sites when the weather was nice. There were photos of baby Lily surrounded by wildflowers that became some of Alexander's most treasured possessions. His daughter was growing up in the beauty her mother created, learning from birth that the world was full of growing things, that empty spaces could become gardens with enough vision and care. On Lily's first birthday, they held a party at the Maple Street lot, which had become something of a community gathering place. The neighborhood had transformed around it, property values rising, new businesses opening, families moving in. Rebecca's original instinct had been right. The garden had changed everything. "Thank you," Rebecca said that evening after everyone had left. Lily was asleep in her stroller, worn out from cake and attention. "For stopping that morning, for taking a chance on the crazy woman with the wildflowers." "Thank you for letting me," Alexander replied. "For teaching me that there's more to life than boardrooms and balance sheets, for showing me magic. There's going to be more magic ahead. I can feel it." She was right. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, James Alexander Quinn, who was as easygoing as his sister was intense. The house got louder, more chaotic, filled with toys and laughter and the everyday mess of raising small children. Alexander cut back his hours even more, promoting his COO to co-CEO and transitioning into a chairman role that gave him more flexibility. He coached Lily's soccer team and attended James's music classes and spent weekend mornings teaching both children about plants in the garden. "Look at you," Sandra said one afternoon when Alexander brought both kids to the office for a visit. "I remember when you worked 80-hour weeks and couldn't imagine any other way to live. That wasn't living. This is living." Alexander watched Lily carefully examine a plant on Sandra's desk, asking questions about its care. "I was just existing before Rebecca." Green Cities Initiative celebrated its 10th anniversary with gardens in 42 locations and expansion into 5 additional cities. Rebecca had hired a director of operations, freeing herself to focus on strategic vision and new partnerships. She gave talks at conferences, consulted with city planning departments, and mentored young people interested in urban environmental work. But she always made time for the actual gardening. At least once a week, she could be found in one of her gardens, hands in the dirt, planting or weeding or simply tending. Often Alexander and the kids joined her, making it a family activity. "Why do we plant gardens, Mama?" Lily asked one afternoon. She was 7 now, thoughtful and curious. Rebecca considered the question seriously. "Because empty spaces need beauty. Because butterflies and bees need places to live. Because people need to see that care and effort can create something wonderful. And because it makes us happy." "It does make me happy," Lily agreed, patting soil around a flower she had just planted. "I like making things grow." Alexander met Rebecca's eyes over their daughter's head, both of them thinking the same thing, that the gifts they gave their children weren't just material things, but values, perspectives, ways of seeing the world. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Alexander and Rebecca returned to the Maple Street lot alone. The kids were with Rebecca's parents for the weekend, giving them rare time together. The garden had matured beautifully, now maintained by neighborhood volunteers with oversight from Green Cities Initiative. It had become exactly what Rebecca had envisioned: a pocket of wild beauty, a gathering place, a reminder that transformation was always possible. 10 years, Rebecca said, standing where Alexander had first approached her. "Can you believe it? Best 10 years of my life." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I love what we've built together, not just the gardens, though those are incredible. The life, the family, us. I love it too. I love you." They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the wildflowers around them swaying in the evening breeze. Somewhere a bird sang and butterflies settled in for the night. What should we plant next? Rebecca asked, and Alexander smiled because he had known she would ask, that she would always be thinking about the next project, the next transformation. Whatever you want, he said. I'm always ready to help, and he was. Whether it was gardens or dreams or the messy, beautiful work of building a life together, Alexander was ready for all of it. He had learned what Rebecca had known all along, that the best things grow slowly, with patience and care and the willingness to get your hands dirty. That empty spaces could become gardens. That stopping to help a stranger could lead to everything. Years later, when Lily was in college studying environmental science and James was exploring his passion for sustainable architecture, Alexander would look back on that first morning as the moment his real life began. The moment he stopped being just a CEO and became a partner, a gardener, a father, a man who understood that wealth measured in wildflowers was worth more than any balance sheet. Rebecca's work continued expanding, her influence spreading far beyond their city. But she never lost the hands-on approach that had drawn Alexander to her in the first place. Well into their later years, they could be found working side by side in gardens, teaching grandchildren about native plants, proving that some partnerships were meant to flourish forever. The Maple Street lot remained their favorite, though, the place where it all started. The city eventually dedicated it officially, putting up a plaque that read, "The Quinn Vance Garden," where one woman's vision and one man's willingness to help transformed an empty lot into a community treasure. May we all be brave enough to stop and plant flowers. And people did. Inspired by Rebecca's example and supported by the infrastructure she had built, community gardens bloomed throughout the city and beyond. Empty lots became gathering places. Neighborhoods transformed. Butterflies returned to places they hadn't been seen in decades. It all started with wildflowers and a woman who believed in magic and a man who learned to see it. It grew into a love story, a family, a legacy. And every spring when the flowers bloomed, Alexander remembered that first morning, the moment he chose to stop, to stay, to plant himself alongside Rebecca in the garden they would tend together forever. That choice had made all the difference. That choice had made everything.